16-year-old Lliana Adank and 17-year-old Eric Sean Goldstrand were students at North Eugene High School. Their yearbook described them as good-natured, fun-loving, with outgoing personalities. On June 9, 1977, before the school year began, the two went to the Broken Bowl picnic grounds at Fall Creek for the day. Along with the picnic, they planned to go fishing and swimming. Later that night, when family was expecting them home, they never showed up. Their parents called police, and the Lane County Sheriff's Office set out to look for them. Sadly, they first found Lliana's body, and then hours later found Eric's body in a nearby brush. Lliana was sexually assaulted, and both had been shot to death. Fingerprints and DNA were collected and analyzed using technology available at the time, but no matches were found. After the initial investigation, the search continued over the years with numerous interviews, polygraphs, and analysis of the evidence, including testing firearms and forensic analyzing of the bullets, but nothing could identify a perpetrator. More than 40 years later, in July 2020, the suspect's DNA was resubmitted for analysis by genetic genealogy, and the DNA was narrowed down to 3 brothers as possible matches. One brother was reportedly eliminated through another DNA test, leaving 2 brothers living in Mesa. In February 2021, as investigators were making final preparations to present the case against Ronald Albert Schroy to the grand jury, the 2 brothers got into a fight with each other. The younger one was hurt, and police were called, and just before they arrived, Ronald committed suicide. Months later, it was determined that Ronald's DNA was connected to the killings, officially solving the 44-year-old case. He was a resident of the area at the time of the murders and was 23 years old. He reportedly moved out of Oregon in the 1980s and had been living in Mesa since 2008. The motive in the killings will never truly be known, but the victims' families are grateful to know the killer can't take any more lives, and they finally have some closure. J. Roland Cook and Tanya Van Cuylenborg were a Canadian couple from Saanich, British Columbia, born in 1966 and 1969 respectively. Jay was described as a quiet and kind man. Tanya was also described as kind, but she was also known to be social and intelligent. The couple met in high school and had been in a relationship for about 6 months. Jay's father asked him to go to Seattle to purchase furnace parts from Gensco for his heating business. He asked if he could bring his girlfriend on the overnight trip, and he agreed. 18-year-old Tanya and 20-year-old Jay headed out in his father's bronze 1977 Ford Club on November 18, 1987. The couple planned to sleep in the van in Seattle's Sodo district overnight, purchase the parts the next morning, and then travel back to Canada. The couple took the Coho ferry from Victoria to Port Angeles, Washington. They then drove south to Bremerton, where they boarded a second ferry to Seattle. A fuel receipt later found in the van confirmed that they purchased fuel on the road between Port Angeles and Bremerton. Witnesses had spotted them boarding the ferry in Bremerton, but this would be the last time they were seen alive. They never arrived at Gensco and never returned home. Their families became concerned when they did not return as planned the next day and had not called either. On November 20th, 2 days after they departed Canada, their families would report them missing and start searching for them. 4 days later, Tanya's half-naked body was found by a man walking his dog in a ditch by a rural road in Skagit County, Washington, a short distance south of Bellingham. She had been raped, bound with plastic ties, and shot. Investigators initially considered Jay, who was also missing, as the culprit, but both families denied the possibility. On November 25th, 66 miles from where Tanya's body was found, a bartender came upon her wallet, surgical gloves, ammunition, zip ties, a lens cap to a Minolta camera, and the keys to the van discarded near the Greyhound station in Bellingham. They would then find the van very close by. Inside the van was a small amount of blood, Tanya's pants, plastic ties of the same type used to bind Tanya, plastic gloves, and various receipts, including the Bremerton-Seattle ferry ticket, confirming the belief that the couple had taken the second ferry. However, Tanya's Minolta camera, which she had brought on the trip, was missing and has never been recovered. A day later, Jay was found beaten and strangled and left under a blanket near a bridge in Monroe, Washington, nearly 60 miles from where Tanya's body had been found 2 days earlier. The Seattle detective at the time believed that the killer left the plastic gloves behind as a sign to the police that they didn't need to look for fingerprints because he wore gloves, basically taunting them. However, the police were able to obtain the suspect's DNA from semen on Tanya's pants left in the van. Investigators believed that the couple most likely met their killer on one of the ferries and maybe offered him a ride upon reaching Seattle. In the months after the murders, both victims' families received a series of taunting greeting cards featuring graphic descriptions of the murders. The cards had postmarks from Seattle, Los Angeles, and New York, and were written by the same person. In 2010, investigators received a tip that the writer of the cards was a 78-year-old Canadian transient with mental health issues. He gave police his DNA and admitted to writing the letters, but police confirmed that he was not the killer and had no connection to the crime. On April 11, 2018, composite sketches of the suspect were released based on the DNA collected at the crime scene using a process called snapshot DNA phenotyping by Parabon Nanolabs. It showed the suspect at 3 different ages, 25, 45, and 65. The case was also investigated by Parabon using genetic genealogy by uploading the DNA to the public website gedmatch.com. Within 2 hours of receiving the profile, genetic genealogist CeCe Moore found cousins from both sides of his family tree, one going back to the suspect's paternal grandmother and the other to his maternal great-grandparents. Soon after, William Earl Talbot II, a 55-year-old truck driver, became the prime suspect. The 2 family trees converged on a marriage, and Talbot, who was 24 at the time of the murders, is the only male carrier for the mix of DNA from the 2 families. Detectives had Talbot under surveillance on May 8, 2018, as he drove around in his work truck. At one point, he leaned out of his vehicle to check on something and apparently didn't notice that a paper cup fell onto the road at West Marginal Way at South Spokane Street in Seattle. The paper cup was then tested and his DNA matched exactly. The next month, the Snohomish County Sheriff announced that Talbot was arrested for the murder of Tanya. Talbot's parents lived 7 miles away from the bridge over the Snoqualmie River where Jay's body was found. 32 years after the murders, Talbot was charged for the murder of Tanya, and on June 16, 2019, a second aggravated first-degree murder charge was added for the murder of Jay Cook. Talbot pleaded not guilty to both charges. He claimed that he had gone all of his life as a very passive person, never raising a hand towards anyone, and that he rarely even got angry. However, his father and sisters described a disturbed boy who grew up into an angry, violent man. When Talbot was 16, he told his father he was planning on running him over with a car as soon as he got his license. He was also violent with both his sisters growing up, causing many injuries and even hospitalizing one of his 3 sisters when she lowered the volume on the radio and he didn't want her to. She also said that her brother sexually assaulted her and was even abusive to the family cat. He was held on a $2.5 million bail, and his trial began on June 11, 2018, and ended on June 28 when he was found guilty on 2 counts of aggravated murder. Talbot did not testify during the trial, and the jury rejected the suggestion from his lawyers that he had sex with Tanya but did not kill her or Jay. To this day, it's still unknown how Talbot actually encountered the pair. He was originally eligible for the death penalty, but because Washington State Supreme Court declared the death penalty unconstitutional, he was instead given 2 sentences of life in prison. This was the first case to be tried in a court of law using the forensic genetic genealogy method, and it was also the first of such cases to result in a conviction.